Tēnā koutou katoa. Kia ora, Joe. Nice to be with you again.
Kia ora, Jess. Kia ora tātou katoa. Nice to be with you too.
So we're on the cusp of International Men's Day, which is always an interesting time, I think, for us and many organisations. And obviously our work has been very much in this space for the last couple of years. We've done a lot of work in the diversity, equity, inclusion space and supporting underrepresented groups. And then just recently, kind of supporting men to find their why in this mahi. And it's been an interesting journey, yeah. And I think it's an ideal time to reflect on that, and particularly heading into the future the challenge, I think, for men in this changing environment and to find their place in the future and how the roles and the expectations are changing.
Yeah, awesome. And I think it's a really interesting time around men's leadership and men's role at work because of some of the forces that are impacting work now and into the future. Things like how AI and technology changes and disruption are really impacting some of the technical disciplines that men are actually overrepresented in. We're seeing leadership capability frameworks change across some of our really quite historically technical professions and career pathways, and men have been overrepresented in those. And so, what's being asked of now of our leaders is actually quite different to what it was. Like we're moving away from this heavy reliance on technical discipline and technical career pathway, like linear technical career pathway progression, into how might you create an environment where multiple cultures and ages and geographies can actually thrive within the teams that you're leading? And that asks men a different question. It asks us, to move outside of your technical discipline, to say, how might I think about my empathy, my ability to communicate, my ability to listen, my ability to adapt my communication style to different cultures and ethnicity. So it's been really fascinating the work that we've been doing around with men around that, around exploring this. Like how willing are you, first of all, to have a growth mindset around the things that you need to develop in your leadership kitty, if you like, to be more relevant for the future of work? That's the first question. Are you up for it or not? And we've seen kind of two cohorts, I would say. One, yeah, I'm really up for it. I really want to ask the tough questions. I really want to tool up around my ability to dial up my empathy, to be a great communicator, to create those environments of high performance. But then we've also seen a group who are quite confronted by this, to say, no, the world's going mad, it's all woke, and I am absolutely going to be entrenched within my technical discipline, and I'm going to hold that firm around my position.
Yeah.
And obviously, our encouragement is that because of the future of work is changing, because the AI and the technology disruption, as well as demographic disruption, it's our kind of nudge to male leaders through our program that you have an opportunity. If it's not necessarily needs to be framed as a negative, you've got this great opportunity to tool up around your ability to adapt.
Yeah. And I think that's what it's all about, eh? For leaders of all genders, it's this ability to adapt because the future is changing and it always has for leaders, but it's never changed as fast as it's changing
Mm.
now. And like you say, particularly in this age of AI, we have got, our point of difference as leaders becomes our humanity and our human skills, but we're often at the backdrop of a career that has put priority on those technical skills. And that's the thing we feel most comfortable and qualified in, and yet embracing these human skills and BQ, emotional intelligence, empathy, all the stuff that we talk about. That's the point of difference, not just for us as leaders and future proofing ourselves, but also to be able to build an inclusive culture, to create an environment of belonging where we can get the best out of our team members who are all now looking very different to us and to perhaps what they did maybe 10, 20 years ago when we may have entered the leadership space. And I think
Mm.
that when I think about the work that we're doing, the conversations that come up in our mobilized sessions, and it's been really interesting for me, particularly to hear the corridor with groups of men, because it's an experience different to my own, right? And I'm used to having this corridor with groups of women. And I
Mm.
think we've talked a lot about supporting underrepresented groups to thrive, which is key. But we also need to make sure that the flip side of that coin is also nourished as well. And that's because we have still the majority of leadership and positions of influence and power that are male dominated, making sure that men can find this why in this, their why in this mahi. And I think that we've talked a lot about the system doesn't work for underrepresented groups, but it's also not working for men either, right? The system that
Yeah.
we all find ourselves in. And there was this beautiful conversation that we had in one of our mobilized sessions where men were talking about how the definition of masculinity has changed, and that can be confronting. And it requires people to change, but also gives more opportunity. And some of the men in that room were talking about the ability to take more parental leave and actually address this more kind of nurturing relationship side with their family.
Mm.
Potentially in the past, they'd never been allowed to do because their role was all about breadwinning
Yeah.
and protecting. And so, with these changes and challenges, comes these amazing opportunities. But I get that that's also a difficult space to navigate because it feels sometimes like the sand is shifting under your feet.
Yeah. Totally. And you're right. There have been some really, really rich conversations and really vulnerable corridor within the mobilized sessions, which are huge, and we're really enjoying being part of them because you can see the change happening in people's mindsets around that, and they're big issues, right? There's been this view around scarcity. Like we talk about, power is not a zero sum game. That quite often the male leaders will be thinking. If there are targets for women and underrepresented ethnicities and cultures, I'm going to miss out in that. And we're really opening up conversations to say, how might we share power? How might we grow the pie, if you like, in terms of power? Because you're right, the system isn't working for anyone. It is from a purely financial sense. So men are on the right side of the gender pay gap, right? Men are on the right side of representation in leadership. The stat that came out recently again was in NZX 50 companies, there are more CEOs named Mark than there are women, for example, which is a very sobering kind of topic, isn't it? But from a mental health perspective, from a relationships perspective, from a suicide statistics perspective, from a domestic violence perspective, from an incarceration perspective, the system is not working well for men, right? And so, if we took a more holistic view of success for all genders, then I think we would start to make some different decisions. And to your point before, men have held on to this very narrow archetype of ourselves around being the stoic provider, and attached our self-worth to our ability to provide back to our family financially, and providing that financial security. And when that is threatened, we have this fight or flight response. And so, as the gender norms are starting to change, and men are starting to do more caregiving, maybe starting to take more parental leave and go part time, I think that's really positive for everyone. Because one, for the men, they'll have more balance in terms of their ability to spend time with their kids and their relationship and their home life. But also it creates more space for other people inside our organizations, right? And so for the whole gender equity conversation, we can create pathways for women, pathways for other underrepresented groups if we are sharing the load at
Mm.
home more, right?
Yeah, and I think that's what I love most about this work. It's moving us from division to unity and uniting everyone around a common goal because we are all in this together. And we've seen this in our corridor, regardless of who we're talking to, everybody just wants to be a good human. And that's what
Mm,
this is about. How do we make room for everyone and all be good humans and give space to those that need it and support those that may not have had as loud a voice as we have? Um, and yet we see in this space so much division around us and them. And if I have to give way to someone, does that mean I'm losing out? And there's that scarcity and that fear that you rightly say comes up when we feel threatened. And I think part of this corridor that has been so valuable is reducing that fear and scarcity and actually getting everyone to a point where we are united around a common goal because this benefits all. And what I've been most impressed with is the majority of the men that we come across in these programs, they want to help. They want to be
mm,
great leaders. They want to build inclusive cultures. They want to give voice to those that they know don't have as loud a voice as them. But not sure how. They're navigating
Yeah.
this world that is uncertain with the shifting sand under their feet. And then they're worried, well, what if I say the wrong thing? What if I offend? What if I'm taking up too much space? And so part of our mahi has been helping them find their space in this new world and this ever-changing environment to be able to feel more comfortable and confident in how they do the right thing and what steps they might take, particularly around building those inclusive leadership capabilities.
I totally agree. And I think that's been one of the biggest insights in doing this work with male leaders is that we've uncovered this almost latent demand and hunger for how can become a more inclusive leader with high IQ, with more emotional intelligence in terms of my ability, because that's in demand. And what it's taken is to create a space where they can actually get a few things off their chest. Like we can't move to that before we go, I'm actually feeling really frustrated and uncomfortable about the diversity and inclusion movement and how that's impacting me and my identity. And so creating a space where that can be voiced and heard and listened to and discussed, that happens. And then the next stage is, but okay, now that I've got that off my chest, how might I tool up? Like, how do I run an inclusive meeting? How could I have really great one-on-one conversations with my teams where I'm talking about flexibility and their requirements at home and unpaid work that they're doing, and all of those sorts of things. So that's been a big insight. Create some space where everyone can be heard, or else we're not going to make progress. And then this latent demand among male leaders to that about tooling up and about becoming more of an inclusive leader. Yeah, I think it's been held on to for a while, and it's become
Mm.
more and more frustrating
Yeah,
for us, and creating the space where it can actually be honestly talked about and some tough questions posed needs
yeah.
to happen in order to get to that next stage.
Yeah, yeah. And with International Men's Day around the corner, this is an ideal time to be talking about this. And I know we've got a webinar that's proving quite popular at the moment to actually start this corridor inside of organizations. And it's been interesting because my work has always been, my busiest day tends to be International Women's Day. And my work's
Mm,
always been in that space. And yet we get a lot of pushback, particularly in the DE&I space. We heavily invest in underrepresented groups, as we should, because they need the support to operate in the systems we find ourselves in. But then there's the pushback of, well, what are we doing for the men? What about the men? And so, of course, now there's International Men's Day. There's an ideal time to say, well, here's what we're doing for the men. And it's going to benefit everybody.
yeah, really looking forward to International Men's Day, 19th of November. So we're going to be talking about what are some of those factors, economically in terms of the future of work, in terms of technology that are impacting the role of men at work, how some of those gender norms really starting to change, and what's the opportunity for men to continue to be relevant in the future of work. So really positively framed, what is the opportunity for men in this future of work? So yeah, really looking forward to having that conversation with those organisations who are booking that webinar. It's going to be great.
Yeah. So find out more on the website. And of course, this is available all year round, not just International Men's Day, but a great opportunity and a great time, I think, to be having this corridor inside your organizations.
Yeah, kia ora.